Now, I want to quickly shift topics to, I don't know if any of you saw the Chris Cuomo primetime show in which Steve Cortes was on and another pro-Trumper. And they were talking about the Charlottesville Fine People hoax. Now, I was just gobsmacked watching Chris Cuomo lie about this to the world in a way that I've never seen such a grotesque lie in public. Grotesque meaning it's very dangerous, it's a dangerous lie, and it's been debunked this week by every major outlet, including Jake Tapper on CNN. Now, when I say debunked, I simply mean people who include the second part of the quote, because the second part of the president's quote makes it crystal clear that he is specifically condemning the neo-Nazis and white nationalists. He called them out by name and condemned them in those words. And if you leave that out, it looks like he's saying the opposite, which is what Chris Cuomo and his staff did. They left that out. Now, I used to think maybe they also were fooled by it. Maybe they've been taken in by the hoax as well, because it's been repeated so many times without the second part of the quotes that I think a lot of people actually believed that the president called the neo-Nazis fine people. So I'm watching this last night and I'm saying, this is a different level now. This is a level where they absolutely know it's a lie because their own network said it's a lie. And I mean that simply by repeating the second part of the quote. It clearly debunks the fine people hoax. And the boldness with which he told this lie multiple times was astonishing. But it gets better. So then Steve Cortes, who is armed with all of the counter arguments and the actual quotes and the sources, he goes on and just castigates Cuomo for completely misleading the public. And he didn't, I don't think he used the word, but just lying, bold-faced lie about something so easily proven. I mean, it's right in the actual quote he's talking about. All you have to do is show the rest, and it debunks the whole thing. So Steve calls him out. And here's the interesting part, and you have to see this clip. I retweeted it just before I got on. Watch for this, because you're going to see more of this, and it's fascinating. And I want you to see if you can take it home and recreate this effect. So Steve Cortes reads the actual quote that says that President Trump condemns totally the neo-Nazis and white nationalists. That should be the end of the conversation. There's nothing else to say. It's part of the same statements. It's right there. It's observable. You can play the video. You can look at the transcript. Now, what did Chris Cuomo do when Steve Cortes showed him exactly the debunking that's objectively, easily provable, and unambiguous? What did he do? Did Chris Cuomo say, no, you got that wrong, and here's why? He didn't. Did he say that's not relevant to the question? He didn't. He changed the subject and acted like the words never came out of Steve Cortes' mouth. You have to see it, because then Steve repeated it a number of times because Chris wasn't acknowledging that it was even being said, like he couldn't hear it or it wasn't even there. And then, of course, Cuomo needed to say stuff, but he couldn't say stuff about the fact that it had just been debunked right in front of him, unambiguously debunked right in front of him, just like his own network did, just like every other network did this week. So instead, he changes it. And he at one point, he tried to conflate the president's comment that there were bad people on both sides, and try to confuse that with the hoax part where it was claimed that he said there were good people on both sides, including Nazis, which he never said. So he's first of all trying to confuse it. Then he tries to show how the question was asked to indicate that the president wasn't really answering a question about the statue event, but rather it was about Nazis. But he also left out the part of President Trump's quote in which he specifically said people were there about the monuments and that was the event. So again, Cuomo just flat out lied by leaving that out, because that was the important part of the quote, is that the president was talking about both sides of the statue controversy, not both sides being ISIS versus the neo-Nazis. ISIS, I call Antifa ISIS because I think of them that way. So, and then Cuomo starts doing the thing that I humorously predicted they all do. When you show them that their main belief is debunked, that the president did not call neo-Nazis fine people, you prove it, they usually say, marching with, and Cuomo just starts repeating this like there's some kind of reboot problem in his brain. Marching with, they were marching with. He was trying to make the point that anybody who was marching with Nazis would be Nazis. Now, you know who agrees with that anyone who was marching with the Nazis would be bad people and Nazis? Everybody. President Trump, you, me, every person in the world agrees with it, and it's not relevant. Because obviously the president wasn't saying, oh, sure, they were marching with racists, but they were racist. The president obviously wasn't making that point, and the reporting does not show that everybody there was marching. In fact, the reporting, and I've actually talked to a witness who was there were a lot of people doing a lot of things, and only some people were marching. So all those other people who were doing other things, there is no reporting, there is no investigation of why they were there or what they were thinking, with the exception of the New York Times that actually interviewed somebody who wasn't with the racists and disavowed them. So we know that there was at least one small group who did not think they were Nazis, were not marching with, were not standing alongside. They were just there for their own purposes. So, and then Cuomo tried to change it so he didn't let Steve Cortes debunk him on the marching with part, because that would have been the second level of going down the hoax well. You start with your first hoax and it gets debunked and you just move to new things that are not true. And then finally, Chris, without admitting that everything he had said had just been debunked, he acted as though none of that had happened and just changed the argument to, well, the president made a moral equivalence between the neo-Nazis, who are terrible racists, and the people who are protesting against them. Now, that argument is a different argument. If you're arguing that, you've already agreed that the entire premise of the first part of your show was a lie. But instead of saying, okay, I hear your quote, Steve, so it is true that everything I just said for the last 5 minutes is a total bold-faced, absolute, incontrovertible lie. He didn't say that. He acted like the argument was always something different. And then he moved it to this equivalence thing. Here's the right way to answer the equivalence thing. Antifa is a bunch of masked, armed anarchists who want to destroy the world. If Antifa took over the planet, I would be in jail. Let me say that again. If Antifa took over the government, I would be in jail, as would a lot of, Trump supporters. So if you're telling me that they are morally better than the neo-Nazis, who, if they were in charge, would do some pretty, pretty horrible things, I'm going to say that you are trying to argue whether ISIS is not as bad as Hitler. If that's your frickin' argument, well, ISIS isn't as bad because their body count wasn't as high as Hitler. If all you have left is arguing that ISIS is not morally as bad as Hitler because they haven't killed as many yet, you don't have an argument. You've gone to a ridiculous point of view, the rational point of view for the President of the United States, the chief law enforcement officer of the United States, in effect. The only position I want to hear from the President is that both sides are 100% morally reprehensible. You can't tell me that Antifa is only 99% bad and the neo-Nazis are 100% bad, you are a freaking idiot if you're making that. If you're making that argument, you are not a serious player. You're a liar, or you're stupid. If you're saying that ISIS is only 97% evil and neo-Nazis are 100%, you're not an honest player in the conversation. They're both frickin' absolutely terribly bad. And here's the worst part. If you tell me that I can go to an event where I can watch these frickin' a-holes, the horrible, horrible Antifa people who wear masks and hit people who believe that the president is doing a good job, they hit them with clubs and bicycle locks. If you believe that crowd having a fight with clubs against neo-Nazis is not something I would stay to watch, you don't know me. I would stay to watch that. I would pay. I would buy a frickin' ticket to watch Antifa and the neo-Nazis beat the shit out of each other. That's what I would stay for. And especially if the police were letting it happen and were protecting me. So I wouldn't be too worried about getting hit because I just stand next to the police. Because nobody was attacking the police, right? And the police weren't stopping the fight. So you just stand next to the police and you would have the best show on earth, which is Antifa and neo-Nazis beating each other to shit. That's the show I want to watch. If you tell me that any reasonable person would have left that show, you have never met a human being. Right. It's a cage match. We literally have pay-per-view events that are not nearly as interesting as this. If we ever had a cage match of MMA where it was, 15 neo-Nazis were going to be in the cage with 15 Antifa people, you couldn't charge enough to make people not watch that. People would pay $1,000 per pay-per-view to watch that. I'd pay $1,000 to watch Antifa and neo-Nazis in a cage fight. And if you tell me that it's a fight between the ones who are 100% bad and the ones who are only 99% bad, I say you're just a freaking idiot. If you can't say Antifa is bad, get off of TV. All right? If you're going to hedge on Antifa being a little bit good, just get off of TV. You're not a patriot. You're not a good person. Let me say this clearly: if you're defending Antifa, you're not a fine person. You're not. You're not even close. You're not even in the general zip code of good people. If you're making that frickin' argument, all right. Serenity now. But the good news is that there's a lot of pushback. I saw on Fox News yesterday, Charles Payne, I'm not sure what the right word is, on-air host or personality or host, I guess. He was hosting a show, and somebody tried to pull the Fine People hoax, and he pushed back. How much did I love seeing a black man push back on the Fine People hoax with actual facts? I loved it. I loved it. And you didn't see that before, right? The first time you've been seeing even Fox News pushing hard on this hoax is this week. And it's because people like me, people like Steve Cortes, Joel Pollack, people like Carpe Dunctum, were making it safe for people to say the truth. Because we sort of went first and we took the arrows. You saw, how many arrows did I get in the back? Are you counting the number of arrows I have in my back for hammering this topic on and on and on? A lot of arrows, right? Candace Owens as well. Other people too. I'm not limiting it to this small group. But because some of us went first and took the arrows and knew we were going to get arrows, we have made it safe for people who would not want to take that risk to at least repeat what we've said, or at least repeat the second part of the quote. So I think history has been changed. And I hope this was a good Periscope today, a little different than most. And I will talk to you later.